Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, however you self identify, welcome to This Week in Malawi, where I tell you how news in the 265 is affecting you and me. In this episode, we are going to be talking about knowing your pension. On the TikTok episode of This Week in Malawi that I posted early on in August, I talked about the Pensioners Association of Malawi coming for the government. They point blank clear demanded that the government issues gratuity for civil servants who retired as of 2022. So these are civil servants who've basically been out of work for 3 years. Now they gave them a deadline. It was a proper ultimatum that by the 30th of August 2025, government needs to have paid out the civil servants gratuity, which as of this recording, they have not yet done. Yeah? Now, why I'm using this as a point of reference is how many of us actually know what happens with our pension? Do we know that the Pension Act was repealed in 2023? There was the original Pension Act, which was put into place in 2011. This is the Malawi Pension Act. And then as of 2023, the Malawi Pension Act was repealed, and quite a few changes were made to the Pension Act. So that's why I'm here. Like I said, I am here to break down the news and how it relates to you and me as Malawians living in the 265. First of all, the Pension Commission was established from the Act in 2023. The duty of the Pension Commission is where actually the Pensioners Association of Malawi was meant to have gone. So I don't know what happened there. But the Pension Commission is where you can go with your complaints or if you've got any concerns. It's their responsibility to make sure that your pension is actually functioning the way it should be. The whole reason why this happened was because we found out that, well, not, when I say we, I mean the government of Malawi. And remember, government is you and me at the end of the day. So what we found was a lot of companies were not remitting their pension. There was a lot of people. If you ever recall reading the newspaper about 2, 3, 4 years ago, over the past, let's start from because it changed in 2023, so it's 2 years since then. Yeah, so 3 years ago, there was a long list of companies that was put on blast for having not remitted their pensions, and we're talking about millions of kwacha, millions of your money and mine that was just not being remitted because as a formal employee, and I'm going to say formal employee because people who are self-employed, business owners, entrepreneurs, we do not have a formal pension scheme that is run through your employer. So I'm going to use the word formal employees when I'm explaining this to highlight that. So if you're a formal employee, you pay your taxes, you pay your benefits and everything. Your pension is 5% deducted from your salary every single month and it's gone. And I'm sure if you look at your breakdown, your gross and your net, there's that big difference. Part of that difference between your gross and your net, 5% is your pension. So imagine you've been paying that for, let's say, 10 years, and then you're done, you're retiring, or you're leaving work for whatever reason. Maybe you just want to go and focus on yourself at home. And then you find out that all the money that you've been remitting for 10 years was never actually remitted on your behalf. Can you imagine that? The heartbreak. So a lot of people had that feeling, and it was happening quite a lot. When I say quite a lot, I mean on a grand scale in this country. That's what was happening. Hence why in 2023 the Pension Act was repealed. So I'm going to go through just a few things, a few key changes to the Pension Act that I think a lot of people are not aware of, and I want you watching this to be aware of if you're a formal employee. And if you're an informal employee like myself, I'm going to get to that because there is an allocation for informal employees in this act as well. Yes, we use books over here, we don't use technology. Don't judge. First of all, other than the Pension Commission, there is now a 3-month waiting period, not 6. So what used to happen before is in an ideal situation, once your pension has matured, you'd have to wait 6 months after you've been out of work for you to then start receiving your benefits. Now that 6-month wait time has been cut to 3 months. So now you only have to wait 3 months for your pension to mature, and then you can go and get your money. Speaking of the money, you can now get 50% of your pension upfront. That is Jiriata. You retired today, or yes, let's go with retirement because essentially pension is supposed to be for retirement, right? You've retired today and you want to go and get your money, you can now get 50%. Before it used to be 40% that you were allowed. I know, it sounds crazy. You were allowed your own money, only 40%. Now you can take 50%. The same 50% also is now available as an early withdrawal option because there are some people who maybe, God forbid, have a terminal illness, and you're not going to make it to 60, you might not make it to 50, you're lucky if you see 45. And you want to enjoy your money while you can. So you can actually do 50% of your money. You can receive 50% of your money as an early withdrawal option. This actually also works for people who've maybe got a big life event that's happening and you know you've been stocking away your pension for quite some time. So there's a good lump sum of money waiting for you. You can withdraw 50% of that now as well. Same waiting time, 3 months for you to be able to withdraw the early option of 50%. Also, something that a lot of people again did not know, which I was guilty of when I used to be part of formal employment and I lost my entire little fund that I had been contributing for 2 years. Let's not get into that. It's not about me, it's about us. So, when you're changing jobs, you're meant to transfer your pension fund from one job to the other. It's not meant to be you change jobs and then that's it. You start over. No, you transfer. No, it's meant to keep growing until your retirement age. The whole idea of a pension fund is so that when you retire, you're not struggling, you're not out there suffering and being a burden to your children who've got their own children to be worrying about. Hello, that's another story for another day. So, once you're leaving one employer to another, it's not mandatory. Under the 2023 Act, it's mandatory for you to transfer your pension from one company to another. In fact, you are meant to know what your pension number is because ideally, and even more often than not, your pension provider is probably going to be the same one. We've got very limited pension providers in the country, which is done deliberately as well for oversight and, just to make sure that everybody's copacetic on the ground. So odds are between the companies that you're switching, it's the same pension provider. Now it's meant to transfer, yeah, so that the money keeps what? Accumulating. Now, very important to note, if you do not transfer this money that you've been collecting, whether it's transferring from one job to another or whether it's withdrawing the money. This particular amendment applies in both situations. Whether you're moving from one job to another or you have finally retired, it's been 6 months and you want to claim your money, you have not done that, that money moves to a government designated default fund. It's not supposed to be used. It's not supposed to do none of that unless you are declared dead. Your beneficiaries have not, you cannot find any single one. And now that beneficiary list is strict and straightforward. You need to have that list compiled. Ndetsoka ndilo ukhale zoti anthu amene ali pa list imene anayambana munayambana now and then what's gonna happen? That's not the problem. But again, that's up to you. Those are your choices. Point is, if you haven't transferred that fund and if you haven't withdrawn that fund in 6 months after it has matured, your money moves to a default fund that's designated by the government, which means at some point in time your beneficiaries should still be able to access that money. And if a long time goes, and that's why I made this episode specifically to highlight this issue, because a lot of young people don't know where that 5% in your salary goes. And this is something that's very common and very sad. A lot of young people, you just receive your net pay and you budget your net pay and you go about your day. You do not think about the little deductions that you see on your pay slip. You don't understand what those deductions are. I hope this makes sense. This is about that 5% that you see going off your salary every single month. You need to pay attention to it because that's your money. And you need to find out what your pension number is, and you need to find out if your money is being remitted. If you work for a good company, it actually is being remitted. They're not even going to cause any fuss because sometimes the companies that you're working for, hey, next thing you see is a notice. And when they go to, oh, you ask about your pension, you want to leave, isn't it? Okay, fine. We'll see you around. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about. So I hope this has been informative. And do tell me again what other topics you'd like me to highlight and what conversations you'd like me to have with you, and just the few things that we can chit chat about in the comment section. Like, subscribe, and see you on the next one.